Hello and welcome. My name is Sonia Harris, and I have got a guest today interviewing on the subject of stress. Now, her name is Gill Mathias, but before I actually introduce her, I've met Gill a couple of times now in sort of business circles, and one of the things that's usually struck me when I've been in her company is her confidence and actually in the conversations that I've been part of, it's been interesting the way that when she's talking there is this sort of calmness about her, and so it's not surprising, I guess, that she would be kind of an expert, I would say, within the field of stress management. But I don't really want to sort of go on and give away things. What I'd like to do is actually to ask Gill to introduce herself and just to say a little bit about what she does, a little bit about her background as well, because I know that she has children and she's a grandmother, and I actually read somewhere that she sees that spending time with her grandchildren keeps her young. So if I can ask you, Gill, welcome and thank you for agreeing to take part in this interview.
That's a real pleasure, Sonia. Thank you for your introduction. I suppose that I'm 65, and I've therefore had quite a bit of experience in life. When I was married very young at 21, I lived overseas for a number of years, which I'll go into in a few minutes. I'm also a qualified tennis coach. I qualified at the age of 21. I'm also a complementary qualified therapist, NLP master practitioner, and Reiki therapist. But I'm more than that. I am a member of the National Council of Psychotherapists, which is really, really interesting. You're dealing with the mind, you deal with the subconscious, and you're really dealing with the live person. I've done conflict mediating, and I also, in my own family life, I've got 3 children and 6 wonderful grandchildren, and I love spending time with them. And yes, I think they probably do keep me young. Where would you like to start with this, Sonia?
Well, I mean, my audience is women over 50.
Yep.
And in particular, professional women who are ambitious in management positions or business owners as well. And I also sort of like look at women in that age group because I am also in my early 50s, where you have a growing family and also you may have aging parents, and it's that sort of you're kind of in the middle. And also women, I suppose, of my age, around 50, there's stuff around menopause, looking back at your life. So there's a number of things there. And so looking at stress, where stress kind of comes in with that, and what your views are, really.
Absolutely. Well, I just wonder whether it'd be helpful because all of what has gone on in my life, particularly the bits living overseas, I think has led me to the end journey of where I am now. And I wonder whether it might be quite interesting to go and hear a bit of where my story was and how I've arrived at where I am now. Would that be helpful?
I think that would be very helpful indeed.
Well, the main thing is that I was married, can you believe, at the age of 21 in 1971. And my, sadly, ex, but on a very friendly basis, was newly qualified accountants. And we chose to go and live out in South Africa. And we were allocated the city of Johannesburg. Well, it was a long time ago, but we went by boat from Southampton to Cape Town, which took 12 days. And then we drove from Cape Town to Johannesburg. And then we arrived in Johannesburg, where the fax had not been invented, the telex had not been invented. And eventually, when we found somewhere to go and live in a little suburb northwest of Johannesburg called Honeydew, there was no telephone. And all of this at the age of 21. And I looked at my children when they were 21 and thought, my goodness me, this was quite a journey for us. But I had qualified as a professional tennis coach, and we were lucky because there was a local tennis club, and we met some wonderful English-speaking and Afrikaans players, and they became firm friends, and several of them are still friends with us now. Besides my tennis coaching, which I did while we lived in Johannesburg, I helped out at a black township called Alexandria on a weekly basis. And I coached children, and we practiced all sorts of ball skills. And I'd often take out pencils and paper and softballs. And they were so grateful. It was as if you've given them the moon rather than just a few pencils.
Mm.
And then we came back, travelled through Africa. I hope this is of interest. It leads you to where I am now.
Yes.
We came back from Africa, and we spent some time travelling from South to North Africa, and came back, had a couple of children, and then my ex was offered a partnership in the big accountancy firm. But it was the good news and the bad news, because he came back and he said, well, it's great, I've been offered a partnership. I said, oh, that's fantastic. So where are we going to live? And there was this deadly hush. And he said, well, it's somewhere called Nigeria. And the position is in Lagos. But it's only for 3 years. So in for a penny and in for a pound, we set off for 3 years in Lagos with 2 children, aged 3 and 5.
Wow.
And the role for a man out there was relatively easy, because my then husband had a full-time driver, went into Lagos with mostly a working air-conditioned office with flushing loos. But as far as the mother was concerned, and not many mums worked, it was a very different story, because the children only went to school from 8:30 to 1, as it was so hot in the afternoons with 100 degrees Fahrenheit, both in humidity and in heat. And it was actually exhausting.
Mm.
But the greater problems was due to the scarcity of food, which needed researching for availability, which meant a trip into Lagos, which sometimes would produce little food, or it would be outrageously expensive. So we lived a lot of vegetables and fruit, which were bought by traders on the side of the road. And of course, for that, you had to go and barter every day. And again, there was no communication or phones, but faxes had been invented. But the wonderful thing of that, Sonia, is that I wrote many, many letters, both when we lived in South Africa and in Nigeria. And when I moved house about a year or so ago, I came across these letters, and they were absolutely brilliant. You just don't write in the same way that you do now.
Right, yes.
But we were often without electricity and water, which meant that you had to make friends on the other 3 islands in Lagos, because you had to take your children to the loo, and they had to perform when you told them to perform, so that you could flush the loos, because when you got back to your home, and ours was in Koi, you might not have any water and you might not have any heat.
Right.
But it was a brilliant experience, and I think it was very, very character building. But the one thing I'm going to mention from that, because that went on to what I ultimately did as a business, is my daughter got pneumonia while we were out there. And the conventional help was very limited at that time. And our nanny, and everybody had a nanny, suggested picking the lemons off the trees along with the leaves from the various plants, including eucalyptus. And she added hot water for my daughter to inhale, and the results were amazing. And that really began my interest in aromatherapy. So I sort of kept that in the back of my mind, and did start an aromatherapy company up some years later. But we returned to the UK as a family, and I bought a gym, had many years' experience on running businesses, the real running of businesses, don't spend too much money, invest it and put it back into a company. And it was part of the Jane Fonda Get the Burn era, which we now know is not a good idea. And I had another baby, and after 3 years I sold the business, which then meant I went into a company which was a property business for 12 years as a director, and ultimately as a managing director. And then I retired. But during that time, I was passionate about essential oils. And I trained in complementary therapy and started an aromatherapy company from scratch and gained immense knowledge. I called it Aromatherapy Gold. And the reason it was called Gold was because my initial is G for Gill. And my 3 children, or our 3 children, are Oliver, Louise, and Dominic. So it was the first initial of each of their names.
Fantastic.
And probably out of 1,000 ideas, probably that was the one that was I wined and dined on. So having started a cottage industry, we progressed to supplying QVC and many, many global clients. And that had become my baby, really, because when my third child went to school and I was newly divorced, it really was like empty nest syndrome. And most people around the area of the 50-year-olds would understand that you can suffer a bit from empty nest syndrome.
Yes.
And so Aromatherapy Gold became my baby, really. But I sold that after 12 years. And I also then discovered that retirement really wasn't for me. I love spending time with my grandchildren and my friends playing golf or playing tennis, but I really wanted to do more. And then I suppose I can go on, if you were interested in how I came to do the stress management, I can go on to do that, unless you've got anything else to go and ask me.
Actually, it was really interesting listening to your history, listening to that story. And I do think that sometimes, you know, as we mature, and I think women particularly, that actually our stories can actually be quite inspiring. How inspiring our stories are to other people, just the telling of them. And I know that I was sitting here and just listening to your experiences in Africa, and actually I could actually see, I saw myself kind of picturing what it might be like, and clearly living in the UK as compared to living in the areas that you said you were living with lack of communication and sort of basic things like sort of toilets, etc. I think you're quite right in terms of character building. And I mean, I suppose looking back at that time now, what would you say was kind of the biggest lesson for you?
I think it was actually, that's a really good question. I think that probably it was learning that you could handle anything.
Yeah.
And not to go and get panicked by the idea that there were some very, very scary experiences in Nigeria, for heaven's sake. I could think of many, but I shan't bore you with them now. But I think that really it was taking a deep breath and saying, I can handle that. I can do this. And looking at the positive side rather than the very, very many negative sides of life.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I think that is so important. And I think that leads me into the fact that you talked about an experience with your daughter and the pneumonia, which must have been very scary at the time, and that a passion came out of that experience in terms of you're talking about sort of aromatherapy and stuff.
Honestly, I was really, really lucky. There were various things that happened during one's life that you look back and say, gosh, I was so fortunate that happened. It wasn't always the case at the time, but it certainly was from the aromatherapy point of view, and from the experience of living and learning about life in other countries and how people lived, and how, particularly in Nigeria, where people had so very, very little, but they were just very, very happy people. You know, sometimes money does muddle the waters.
Yeah. So you touched on stress, and I am actually interested in why you decided to go into stress management.
Well, I think that probably what happened, Sonia, was that when I discovered that retirement just wasn't for me, I really had to go and look at where I could get out of my comfort zone and where I could turn my qualities to a profession, really. I've been involved in a lot of charitable things, but actually I did feel that I wanted to go and retrain and earn some more money. And so I think that having talked to one of my mentors, we really discovered that my qualities were being a communicator and a good listener. And so I trained as a business coach. And I found that I really could empower people to believe in themselves. But that was really by asking the right questions, but not giving the answers. And my elevator speech has always been that I transform lives by raising clients' self-esteem and confidence. And that's the kind of thing that when you're playing tennis and someone says to you, so what do you do? As you're changing ends, it became a very, very normal thing for me to go and say, oh, I transform lives by raising clients' self-esteem and confidence. And actually, you would often get people at the end of the day come and say, what did you mean by that? Tell me more. You know, it was like fishing. You got them on the hook, really.
Yes.
And then I realized that I had a gift for identifying and analyzing the problems of an individual, and then ensuring that my approach was specifically tailor-made to fit their personality and character. So when I first started doing this, I didn't plan on doing stress management. It was just that as I did more coaching, I discovered that so often that was the core of people's problems, that they were anxious and they were stressed. So I did further training in stress management, and that's how I ended up doing stress management, which I tell businesses when I go to see the HR or the leadership development person, catch it when it's very small, because that's like popping a spot. If you leave it until you've got a lot of absenteeism and the spot has become bigger and bigger and gone into a boil, it takes a lot of time to go and repair people's self-esteem and confidence and get them to be well-being in their lives. So I suppose that's really the answer about how I came into stress management. But actually, I really enjoy it because you can, obviously it's a very serious subject, but there are lots of things you can look at with humour, and humour is good for people to smile and laugh, of course.
I mean, I'm just listening to you, and that's a real clear example of somebody who has a strength, and that strength's identified, and then obviously sort of creating a passion out of that, and your passion obviously taking you into a sort of a role where I'm assuming you get paid to do it, because I know that one of the things that when I, especially personal development, often people are told, you know, find something that you're passionate about, and then the best thing, of course, is to get paid to do it. And I think stress. I mean, stress is something that impacts I think everybody. From every part of life. It doesn't matter where you are. And I kind of picked up on obviously the work that you do with organisations, and especially when you said it's about catching it at the beginning, and you know, at the start of absenteeism. And I work in an organisation at the moment where there is a lot of stress because there's been a lot of changes, and I can see that there is a lot that the management can do to support staff, but in actual fact, what tends to happen, it comes at the point when the problems are really acute.
Absolutely.
So I can see the benefit of what you're doing, and so my next question really is, because you were saying that what you learned from looking back at your life, and the thing is that you can handle it. Gosh, those are really strong words, and if we can sort of take hold of those, because of course some sort of focusing in on women in their 50s, because that's a big change for a lot of women, menopause and stuff like that. And my question is, look, some women thrive, okay, other women struggle, okay, and so what would you say is the main things? What are the things that actually you feel impact on women's ability to cope with stress, especially in their 50s?
I think there are loads of things, and you're absolutely right. Just going back on the yes, I do get paid for my work, but I do a lot of pro bono work for charities and people in need, and I'm a great believer that is I love my passion of helping people, and I know it sounds a bit twee, but I do a lot of pro bono work, and I enjoy that. It's very satisfying. I think that the problem is when people get to 50, it depends on their relationships. It depends where they are in business. It depends on their family. But I'm a great believer that fitness and eating habits have an enormous impact on every aspect of life. And, you know, if, for example, you know, you're a diabetic, you don't have sugar. I've had a couple of deep vein thromboses and I would not have too much vitamin K. And you just learn to go and look at yourself, and sometimes even going to a nutritionist is a really helpful experience to go and put you on the right side of what are allergies, what you should eat, and then follow some kind of fitness regime. You know, it doesn't need to be much. You go walking for 10 minutes each day. But I also think that, you know, it's important to realize that every decade brings change. I mean, you can be fab at 40 and focused at 50. You can be sexy at 60. Now, I'm 65. I don't think you call me sexy, but I feel sexy, and that's good. Sensational at 70. I mean, change really, really should be embraced. Because a generation ago, I can remember my mother, my grandmother, you know, sitting in a chair, and she would only be about 55 or 60, and she didn't move. Whereas now, a 60-year-old is a bit like a 40-year-old. But I will mention about the menopause, and the reason I know a bit about this is I was fortunate I didn't suffer too much, but it was one of our greatest selling products with aromatherapy. We sold bottles and bottles and bottles of the stuff with QVC, and it really can give hugely positive results to mood swings. And acupuncture is another very helpful natural remedy and gives holistic results. And by holistic, and that's how I do my stress management, I mean it has an effect on the overall treating of the whole person, both mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I think that's a really important thing. Now, I could happily give your readers oils which we use specifically for menopausal issues, and that would probably be a good thing if I could give you a link to that.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, it has things like clary sage and Roman chamomile and peppermint oil, all of which can balance the hormones. Important to go and say these have to be in a carrier oil, but I could definitely go and send you the link to that. And it's a proven, if you like, I call it a recipe. It's a proven product which really was shown to go and help people. And you keep this little bottle in the fridge and use as and when necessary, really, on the top of your feet or on the back of your neck. And it's been really, really helpful.
That sounds great.
And one thing is when you get to sort of 50 and above, sometimes you have the opportunity, like I have, as being a grandparent, and that's just an awesome experience. And you've got so much to give to the child. And the child just loves hearing about what Mummy was like when she was a little girl. And I know that you've got that experience yourself.
I do. I've got my two grandchildren are 5 and 4.
Yep.
And actually, because I was a foster parent for a while, my foster daughter has just had her 3rd child, so it actually feels like I'm a grandmother to 5 children, young children, and yes, there is. It can give you a new lease of life, I think, and as I think I pick up on what you're saying about fitness and eating habits, because one of the things for me is I've had health problems over the last couple of years, and it's drastically limited the access I've had to my grandchildren, purely because I've had difficulty in kind of getting to them, traveling. And one of the things that I've taken on board more recently is my health, you know, so a mind, body, soul type thing. And so I really, really do kind of, I'm listening to you when you say, actually, those things are very important, especially now that I am in my 50s. I don't want to be the grandparent that's just sitting around and I can't move.
Oh, I can't imagine with your character that would be the case. But I was putting one of my little children, I've got grandchildren between 3 and 10, and I was putting one of the little rogues to bed the other night. He looked me fair and squarely in the face, and he said, they call me Bubba, because I didn't want to be called Granny. And he looked at me and he said, Bubba, I really do like you, but you have got a lot of wrinkles. I said, well, I love you and you have no wrinkles.
That's fantastic. Oh, they're great. I'm just so in love with my grandchildren, I have to say.
It's a precious, and actually it's such a privilege to be a part of their little lives.
Yes.
And you hope in time that they remember the little things you did for them. I mean, I keep mints in the front of the glove department of my car. And they always know if they open it, there'll be some mints in there. So every time they'll smell a mint or lavender, because I permanently put lavender onto their feet to go and help them to sleep. As they grow older, every time they smell this, I hope they'll think of me in a positive way.
Well, they will. I mean, and it's those moments, isn't it? And it's those, it's the smells, what we hear, what we see, feel. Those are the things that we kind of take forward, don't we? And I think we do remember moments, don't we? Like that.
Absolutely, you certainly do, and you can suddenly be getting a smell of something and think, oh gosh, as I did my mother's perfume, and I came to actually not like the smell because it brought back such traumatic memories for me. But that was a long time ago.
Now, you very kindly offered your sort of 7 steps to reduce stress, and that's something obviously I'm going to be offering to people that are listening to this. So if I can ask you now, can you sort of tell me a bit about that, whether you want to share a few of the steps or kind of sort of like go through some of what you share in that particular program? And I know that it could be as a 7-day program, or it could be an ebook, so I'm kind of thinking about how I'm going to put that together for people.
This is something that I've used a lot with people. Very often when I've done management courses, I've given this out, and people say it's been really helpful. And there are 7 steps in this, and I thought fairly carefully about how I would sort these steps out so that it was easy to do alone in the house, easy steps to follow. And so in the first step, I talk about deciding how much stress is enough stress for you. And you actually need to go and work out what is your stress, what are your core stresses. But I go into that in the course. I talk about, is it possible to have no stress in your life? But actually, you do need a certain amount of stress to make you motivated to go and get to the next stage. And they're roughly about sort of a 4-page on each step. And then the step 2 is, having gone through step 1, is understanding where your stress is coming from, and trying to get you to do, I think we might talk about this a bit later on, about 15 minutes of relaxation. Something you could either, I don't know whether any of your viewers are into yoga or into breathing exercises, which I can talk about as well, into walking. It's just having just a little bit of time for yourself and understanding where your stress is coming from, because most of what we worry about doesn't come into a reality anyway. The step 3 is learning to accept the things you can't change. Now, some things you can't change. I mean, if you've got to be back for a child by a certain time, you can't change that. If you have a parent that isn't well and you've got to go and see them, you can't change that. You just have to put that into your little schedule. And for those things you can't change, you have to work on accepting them and just letting them go. They become part of your life. Step 4, really important. You must take some time for yourself. Now, that's not easy to say to a new mum or a new parent. But when you're 50, usually you haven't got the responsibility of looking after young children. You might have a job. You might not have a job. You might have retired. Whatever your life is, take some time for yourself. And it's really, really important to go and look at yourself in the overall picture. Even just find a short time just to be you, to go and think about you, do something that you want to go and do. And the step 5 is learn what you need to stop doing. And by that I mean, do you need to stop putting up with some certain behavior from those around you? Do you need to stop smoking or drinking much alcohol and caffeine? Would it be helpful to stop having negative thoughts? And it puts ideas about how you can change your mindset, really. Mindset is so important. I know in the work that you do and I do, Sonia, it's desperately important. And I always talk to people about when you are trying to think subconsciously about things, of just thinking about your subconscious mind as being your computer. And you really can bring the computer out of your head. And it's like setting the computer again. It's that is your belief system. You can put different things into your computer and program it into your mind to go and believe that you can do things rather than you can't do things. And that's a really important point. The step 6 is learn what you can start doing. So by that, I probably talk about the belief system, about how you can do things rather than you can't do things. Are you going to stop people? Are you going to stop saying yes to everything? Are you going to be able to do the things that you want to go and do and decide what is right for you? And I suppose that the last one is taking action, is you work your way through these steps in order to go and get to some kind of conclusion about where life is going for you. And at the age of 50, you should be able to go and do that. So that's basically what that's about. It's breaking big goals down into smaller tasks, one step at a time, and trying to then put a completion date on each task, really. So just say, well, step 1, I'll do that by such and such a time, and step 2 by a certain time, and then you'll know where your completion date is. And if people are successful with that or have questions, of course, I can give a link to my website, and they're very welcome to come back to ask any questions from me as well.
That's great.
So I hope that that's helpful.
No, that's great. And at the end, what I'll do is, if I'll ask you for the links that you said that you,
Sure.
then you can give them. I mean, I was taking some notes down as you were talking. I was thinking, oh gosh, yeah, I'll write that down. And I mean, I've sort of like pulled out your 3, 4, and 5 steps. All of them are really good. 3, you're talking about sort of like meditation and relaxation and stuff. And I know for many years I was somebody that's found it very, very difficult to relax. I also very sporty. I was very sporty growing up, and so for me, to stop and sort of like meditate for whatever amount of minutes was something. It just felt like, well, I'm not doing something, and so what advice would you have to somebody sort of listening to this who actually is sort of thinking, I just can't relax, I don't know how to stop? Just something a simple tip, really, or that they could do.
I think there are various things. I really think there is a lot of help out there. I think that things like that yoga suits some people, doesn't suit me. Pilates suits me. It's anything where you can actually be breathing. And I'm a real believer in breathing. And it is simply every morning when I wake up, before I get up, for 15 minutes, I lie in bed and I breathe in for 10 and I breathe out for 12. And by that, I mean you're breathing in the oxygen, you're breathing out all the bad carbon dioxide. So you breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you breathe the whole lot out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that is really, really, really helpful. And I think that probably that, along with exercise, drinking plenty of water, of course, is a fairly important thing. I know all of us want to go and have our wine and so forth, but carrying a bottle of water around with you also is really helpful for your health. And certainly meditation, I say yoga didn't suit me, but Pilates does. It's all these kind of exercises where you can actually be breathing, because really breathing does stop panic attacks, it stops stress, and it's really, really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was such a big surprise actually when I started looking into sort of yoga and meditation, etc., to find that actually breathing was that number one element of it all. And I know that in my work, and I work with I manage a team, a group of people, trainees, and often when they get anxious, worried about something, my thing is, right, breathe. And actually you realise that people haven't been breathing, in the way that we think we should be breathing. So I think that's, I mean, for people listening, I think if they just get one thing, is that to be taking part in something that gets them breathing. I just think that, that's a really, really good tip. I mean, the other thing for me is, and I think when I've reached certain ages, as I'm coming up, so I'm in my 50s now, is this thing about taking time for yourself.
Yes.
And you said about looking at yourself, and is that something that you did?
I think I did. I mean, I came through when I came through my 50s, I was just going through a divorce. I got three wonderful children, felt very guilty of the fact that we had separated and divorced, but knew that there was plenty more to life. And having felt that one had given the roots to grow and wings to fly to the children, it was my turn to be able to go and do what I wanted to go and do within the bounds of still feeling responsible of a parent. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm a grown up now. I'm in my 50s. I should be able to do what I want to do now.
Well, it doesn't. You know yourself, Sonia, and I know it doesn't work out like that. You think, oh well, I'll just go and do this, and then some people have aging parents,
Yes.
some people have difficult teenagers, some mums are working and they're trying to get the grandparents to go and help, whereas the grandparent would like to be doing something different.
Yeah.
As a mother in particular, you've got this guilt. I mean, once you're a parent, you're always a parent.
Yes.
But you really ought to be able to, unless it's important, be able to say, right, this hour is my time.
Yeah. Yeah. And your next step 5, and I think this is such an important one, and I like the way that you've actually kind of couched it. Learn what you need to stop doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you don't have to at that age, when you're a child, when you're in school. Not that I'm saying you don't have to go and respect everybody, but when you are working, you obviously have to respect everybody to go and climb the ladder. But there does come a point where you don't have to put up with certain behaviour from those around you. You can speak your mind, or you can do what you want to. And I certainly am a great believer in many people saying, oh, I can't do this and I can't do that. Stop having those negative thoughts. It's not a can't do life, it's a can do life, really. And you can avoid unnecessary conflict, build on your wonderful relationships and your the friends that you've got. And I think another question I've got in that particular step is, do you need to say no more often? Do you always have to say, yes, I can, yes, I do always have to be the pleaser, or can you be yourself? It's important.
Yes, it's gosh, I read a book recently called Essentialism, and the name of the guy's come out. Actually, the book is actually here. Essentialism by Greg McKeown, and in actual fact, I've been listening to other people as well, and this thing about no, and I think that the biggest thing for me is that when you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And it doesn't matter what that is, whether it's yes to staying late at work, taking on more tasks. It's saying no to your family because you're not there. More recently, because I'm trying to look after my health. I'm not trying. I am focused on looking after my health at the moment, and I know that some of the choices that I'm making in terms of what I eat. If I say yes to something, I am saying no to my health. I'm going walking on a daily basis now, and if I choose not to do exercise, if I'm and when I'm saying I'm saying yes to staying in and putting my feet up, and no to actually my fitness and my health. So it kind of is on different planes. It's acting on, isn't it? So, but I just think that's such a useful one for people to really grasp and kind of make happen in terms of actually being able to say no.
Yeah, and also I go back to the office situation where we run courses, and one of the courses that we run is called Managing Difficult Conversations, and learning to say no. For example, that if you are middle management, you can go and get your senior manager coming to you on a Friday afternoon and saying, can you do this, that, and the other? And I want to have it all before you leave at 5 o'clock this evening. And learning to have the skill to go and say, well, Mr. Jones, I can do this for you and I can do the other, but I can't do them all. And which is the most important? So you put the pressure back on the person who's asked to go and do it, rather than just expecting you to go and say, oh yes, I can do the whole lot.
Mm.
And there are various skills that you can go and learn, and tactics you can learn to go and avoid. You can always say, no, I can't do this, but what I can do, going back to the can do rather than the can't do, is I can do this next Wednesday afternoon, but I can't do it this Wednesday afternoon because I'm playing golf, or I'm playing bridge, or I'm going shopping with my friend, and not to be afraid that this is your life and your time.
And what do you think? I mean, these for some people this will be new to do, and I wonder what you think about sort of habits, about how people sort of do this and kind of make it something that they do habitually, because we can start to do something, and then what happens is that we start to then go back to our old ways, don't we?
I think we do. I think that actually what tends to happen with people is I think that people get fearful of sometimes not being liked and in situations. Yeah. And as we all know, or as in our self-development life, like you, Sonia, we know that fear is just false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned a lot of points in the questions that you've mentioned, but I can actually go and say to you that really very little fear becomes a reality. We worry about it and we think it might happen, and it never does. And so I think that probably the quick answer is that I would just say that try not to have fear. Try to work on yourself as a whole person and say, I'm me, and I can go back to this thing that I can go and say, I can handle it. I can handle anything that is given to me, and I will be a better person for it. But I do think that if some of your people haven't worked in self-development, that will sound a bit of garbage. But I know that you're talking about it, and when I give you my link of my website, there are masses of articles on stress and well-being, how you can be a better you, which is totally free and for people to go and read.
That's fantastic. And that kind of leads me into my last question. Okay.
Right.
And it's interesting because this journey for me really, and sort of like because of certain things that have been happening to me in my 50s, I have sort of thought back to my early 30s and thought actually there were some choices that I made back then that's had an impact on where I am now. Okay, so my question is, okay, so looking back at your journey, and if you were able to talk to you back at some point, whether it's in your 30s or in your 20s, what knowledge do you have now that you'd want to say to the younger Gill?
Gosh, that's a really interesting question. And particularly as you've got, and I've got grandchildren, it's just what you want to go and pass on, really, isn't it?
Yes.
The problem with being a parent is that actually they'll accept everything except your advice.
Yes.
What can I say? I think that probably I'd say, I have got ideas, things. I would say work with positive people and the ones that can do. Learn to avoid negative people. Smile. And learn that optimism is empowering, uplifting and inspiring. I think I'd also go and say, because my life has been very up and down, but I think it's on the up now, I think I'd say to a 16-year-old, you might be in for a rough ride, but hold on, you can handle anything and it will all be worthwhile. I've always told my children that if you don't ask, you don't get, and this is important because if you're not prepared to go ask the questions, you might not get to the next stage. I suppose be a Pollyanna and aim for the sun and not for the gloom.
Yes.
She's always glad about things. What else would I go and say? Learn not to worry because 99% of what we worry about never happens. That's a fairly important one. Yeah. And I have in my office, I've got the poem If. Actually, I'm not in my office at the moment, but I've got the poem If. And I think that if I was telling my current self back at the start of my journey, or even to my grandchildren as they grow up, I think the two lines that stick out there, and I know them, is if you can meet triumph and disaster and treat those imposters in the same way, and then the poem finishes eventually, you'll be a man, or in this case, a woman, my friend. And that's really important. So the good things that happen, the bad things that's happened, learn to be able to handle them.
Yes.
What else are we going to say? Learn to love who you are and not who others would have you be.
Yes.
And really be happy, be happy, be happy. You know, you life is really, really for living. And as you know, the most important thing that you've got is your health, and you are doing brilliantly well working your way through that. Keep fit, eat well, sleep well, and when you're anxious, breathe in for your 10 and breathe out for 12, which is actually my mantra. Everybody I know knows that's what I do, whether I'm on the tennis court, with a tense point, or golf, or you're in a traffic jam and you're thinking, I'm never going to get there on time. Breathing, because you don't need to meditate to do that. And I think that I probably might finish off by saying to this young person or to my grandchildren, pray for strength and it will come. And that I really, really believe is true. So that would be my advice to your readers, and I hope it's been of some benefit to them.
Gosh, Gill, if you could see me now, I've got a massive grin on my face. I am feeling very happy, and actually, I'm grinning so much that actually my lips are hurting me. and and I mean, just listening to that. I mean, I was smiling all the way through. I was nodding my head, in agreement with everything that you were saying. And yes, that thing about being happy, being around positive people. Yes, I mean, I'll definitely be replaying and listening to those things.
And I think that probably the point about the happiness is no one else is in charge of your happiness except you.
Yeah.
And also in the bad times, time heals almost everything. So sometimes in times of disappointment, give it time and it will heal. It will heal.
Yeah.
I suppose you could go and say, I'm only just now writing myself a little list down, because I think to myself and say, well, will I tell myself or my grandchildren? But I also think as a side thing, things like being polite, be kind, being respectful of people.
Yes.
Actually, I'll tell you what, be respectful of the people on the way up, because you may need them on the way down.
That's so true, isn't it? That's so true.
I think that's a rather sort of long answer to your question, but
no, that's
I got on the flow.
No, that's great, because it's stuff that we need to hear, but we need to hear over and over and over again. You know, it doesn't matter how good we think we are at these things. We actually do need to be reminded about them. So, Gill, thank you so much for you know, giving your time. And I know that there's a lot of things in there, from you very kindly sharing your story at the very beginning of that journey, and actually how your that journey has actually shaped you as a person, and how the strengths that you kind of developed through that journey, the highs and the lows, as well as you explained, has helped you to actually sort of like find a passion that you in terms of helping and supporting people. And I know that I said, you know, in terms of pay, but you talk about actually, you know, giving your time for free, because you do want to help people. So thank you so much for all. There's so much in there, honestly, and you're going to be giving your 7 steps that you kind of did an overview of.
That's a pleasure. And if I give you the link to my website, there is loads of information. And,
so if you can, if you can share so if you can sort of share your links now, and then I'll also have them in the written form. But if you can say them as well.
So now you'll know how technophobic I am, but I will try and go and get this, which is www.goldcoachuk.com. And if anybody wanted to email, it's goldcoach gb@gmail.com. And I do hope that this has been of interest to your readers. But if they are new to self-development, some of it may go above their head. But if you play it again, you will understand what I'm talking about. And I say there are plenty of free articles on my website for people to be able to read and enjoy, I hope.
Thank you. So I'm actually going to leave this recording, this interview, by actually saying breathe in for 10 and out for 12. Okay, thank you again. Bye.
Thank you so much, Sonia. All the best. Thank you.